Chapter 402. Seeing this, Jianghu smiled at Qin and said in a low voice, "Susu must have fallen for your little brother. She doesn't even want to eat or drink and she is so shy when she sees you. You know, the two of them are about the same age, so it's quite suitable for them to be together." Suitable? Qin thin lips were still curled up. He always looked like this, whether it was in the business world or in their daily meetings. His handsome side profile didn't change much. He was noble and domineering, a standard soldier. But this time, Jianghu felt that his smile was a little different, but he couldn't tell what was different if he had to say it. Strangely, the surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped by several degrees all of a sudden. Was it because the heating here wasn't good enough? On the other side, Han Susu was still expressing her regret, hoping that the young man would look at her. Even if it was just a glance. Finally she got her wish. Fujio looked up and said, "You should thank Brother Imo." Han Susu felt that the young man was super cool, especially when she thought of how he stood in front of her at school. Her heart started to beat erratically again. She automatically ignored the reason why the young man saved her. No matter what, the other party had forgiven her. Han Susu smiled and followed Fujio into the private room happily. Although this meeting was also in an entertainment venue, it wasn't as noisy, and there were many types of alcohol. The sound of piano could be heard outside the private room, and inside people were singing, steaming, and eating. It was a high-class private club. As soon as they entered, Han Susu pulled the young man to sit by the song selection table. "Let them chat like big brothers. What do you want to sing? I'll help you." Fujio glanced at the Almighty, and indeed, the three of them seemed to have something to talk about, so she didn't go over. Qin sat in the dim light, his posture lazy and abstinent. His tie was already untied and it was crooked. His eyes unconsciously looked at the young man and woman who were ordering songs. He tilted his head and lit a cigarette, as if this was the only way to suppress the inexplicable stuffiness in his chest. The stuffiness came for no reason. Bit by bit, it seeped in, and as the song overflowed, it accumulated more and more. In order to dispel this irritation, Qin turned his head and focused his attention on Han Feng, who was speaking. "Susu, I can't control her anymore." Han Feng glanced at the other side and smiled. "You insisted on making me make this call. It seems that it's not just because you know you're wrong. After being saved by your brother like a hero, even your character has softened a lot." Qin didn't say a word. He raised his hand and drank the wine in the glass, his eyes a little gloomy. It seemed that this was the only way to suppress things that were getting more and more out of control. But reality proved that some things could not be suppressed at all. Han Susu had never been a calm person. She sat there and smiled, asking Fujio what she liked. Qin found the voice a little ear-piercing. Someone once said that the Han family's Missy had a good voice and was very good at singing. It was just that she didn't want to enter the entertainment industry, and the Han family wouldn't allow her to do so. Qin used to think that her voice wasn't bad. But that was not the case today. Especially when the young man turned his head to smile at her. Chapter 403. He was starting to think, it wasn't a good idea to agree to bring the youngster here. Qin tried to distract himself again. It was to prevent himself from grabbing the youngster and running away. Suddenly, for some unknown reason, he just hated girls. Any girl who got close to the youngster would be an eyesore. Even Han Susu was the same. And Qin knew very well that many high school students in puberty liked girls like Han Susu. She dressed beautifully and acted coquettishly. Would his little brother like her too? With this in mind, Qin's eyes dimmed. Jianghu seemed to have realized something as he turned to look over. He saw Qin's deep eyes staring at the youngster's side profile. It was so deep that it didn't seem like his usual self. That gaze, Jianghu didn't know why, but his heart skipped a beat. He must be overthinking. Seeing Qin look away without changing his expression, Jianghu thought that he must be overthinking. But Qin had been possessive since he was young. He probably couldn't bear to see the little brother he finally recognized become someone else's. Luckily, Fujio didn't stay with Han Susu for long. After she was done, she walked over and looked at him with a bright smile. "Brother Imo, what do you want to hear?" Looking at that clean and harmless face, his boredom seemed to be dispelled by this kind of light. Qin flicked his cigarette butt and said, "You can sing?" Fujio laughed. "I'm the current school hunk of number 1 middle school. How can I win without some substance?" In fact, when she was still Z, she disguised herself as a resident singer in a bar. Of course, she wouldn't tell this to the Almighty. "Then let's invite the current school hunk to sing what you're best at." The coldness in Qin's eyes dissipated a lot. The current school hunk was a joke. because the previous school hunk of number 1 middle school was Almighty Qin. Some people even predicted that no school hunk could be more handsome than Almighty Qin, whether it was in the past or the next few decades. Until Fujio appeared. There was even a comparison between the two on the school's internet. But the more they compared, the more the topic went astray and it became a couple. Fujio found it interesting, but she didn't know what expression the Almighty would have when more and more people said he was gay. Fujio had sung quite a few songs when she was a resident singer. She tilted her head to look at the person sitting on the sofa, the person who had been protecting her since they first met. Her fingers slid down and clicked on Mayday's new song. Fujio's singing posture was absolutely professional. Her fingers were on the vertical microphone, and she was sitting on the high chair with a smile on her face. Unlike Qin, Fujio always dressed up for the night. A cool leather jacket paired with a pair of white jeans, silver hair and pure black earrings. No one would have thought that Fujio was a girl. Just by sitting there, she seemed to be able to generate electricity. She was so handsome that it made people's hearts flutter. Han Susu's gaze was already a little infatuated, and when that young man's unique voice came out, she couldn't take her eyes off Fujio. However, Fujio's eyes were looking at Qin, very lazy and sunny. I want to write a song about you. I want to keep a cat. You wanted to go back to every scene and slow down every watch. We build a castle at the corner of children and adults. Chapter 404. Under the light, the silver-haired youngster held the microphone in his hand and looked at Qin with a smile. His thin lips were very close to the microphone, and all the light in the room seemed to be hitting his lips, gathering into dots of light. Life can't be longer, fireworks fall from the corner of my eyes. The world can't be bigger, you stare at my smile. Among all the passing scenery and people, you treat me the best. Obviously, this song was sung to Qin. Han Feng laughed softly. Qin, your little brother is really good, he knows everything. Qin didn't speak, still holding the wine glass in his hand. Rather than saying that he didn't speak, it was more accurate to say that the moment the youngster opened his mouth, his eyes never left Fujio's body. Even he didn't know what kind of expression he had when he looked at Fujio. Hidden in the darkness as if no one else was around, he wanted to take her for himself. Jianghu watched from the side. His heart that had been thumping just now began to sink. Qin had never looked at anyone like that. Was he thinking too much, or did Qin really have feelings for Fujio? Jianghu was a smart man. Unlike Qin, he majored in medicine and had seen many people in that circle. He was more sensitive to such things than Qin, plus, the onlooker saw things more clearly so he could see things more clearly. Good brother? Which older brother would look at his younger brother like that? Jianghu also knew that some people weren't really gay. Sometimes, it was because their personalities were too similar and they were always together. Plus, the youngster's face was so handsome that he could ignore his gender. Qin didn't mind being nice to him. So Jianghu was still hesitating if he should point it out. Because if he said it, Qin might think in that direction and then he would really be gay. He couldn't bear the consequences of the Qin family ending without descendants. But if he didn't say it and the situation continued, Qin and Fujio. Wait a minute, why did he always think that his friend was more likely to be gay in the future? Thinking of this, Jianghu was also depressed. He wanted to get the wine glass. Qin turned his face and met his eyes, which made Jianghu pause. After all, his friend's indifferent eyes seemed to be able to see through his thoughts. The Han siblings had no idea what was going on. Han Feng was still puzzled. Hey, what's wrong with you two? Why are you looking at each other? Nothing, Qin replied faintly. Han Feng lifted a brow at Jianghu. Really? Jianghu laughed and said, what else could it be? I just think that Fujio's singing is pretty good. Now that he is the school hunk, us former seniors are all standing behind him. Not only does it sound good, it looks good too. Han Feng lowered his voice and moved closer to the two. I'm going to be busy now. Look at Susu. She's about to confess her love in public. She's so infatuated. When Jianghu heard this, he would definitely join in the fun. But ever since he saw Qin gaze, he subconsciously turned to the left. He hadn't noticed it the previous few times. Chapter 405. Han Susu was still watching Fujio walk down from the stage with a pink face. She didn't notice the change in her surroundings. It could be said that Han Susu had never felt such a thing for anyone in her entire life. She really wanted to see the other party. Even if the other party only said a few words to her and stood beside her. She felt like her heart didn't belong to her. Ever since she was young, she had been surrounded by rich and powerful people. Their looks and temperaments were always superior. The elder brothers of the Qin family and the Jiang family were much more outstanding than their peers. She used to like Big Brother Qin. But she knew very well that once she crossed his bottom line, she wouldn't even be able to get close to him. So she didn't like him anymore. But even if she didn't like him, she still looked down on other people. Those in school couldn't even be compared to these brothers she knew. Until yesterday at number 1 middle school. Han Susu finally felt that there was someone who wouldn't try to please her because of her family background. The young man was very cold to her from beginning to end, and he didn't talk much. But it was that coldness that made Han Susu feel that he was the one she was looking for. So Han Susu threw away her previous arrogance. When Fujio finished singing, she went up and grabbed Fujio's arm. I ordered a duet. You sing the guy and I'll sing the girl. I'm sure you'll like it. Fujio frowned. She usually thought girls were cute, but in fact she didn't like it when someone approached her so directly. The Almighty was familiar with her, so it wasn't a big deal to touch her. An unfamiliar person. Fujio almost flung Han Susu's hand away in a moment of reflex. You sing first. Han Susu's cheeks were pink. No matter what other people thought, she liked the feeling of standing side by side with the young man. Forget it, since she was the sister of the Almighty's friend. With this thought in mind, Fujio put one hand in her pocket and took the microphone from Han Susu. She was about to sing when a gust of wind blew towards her, and the microphone was pulled out from behind. It was Chinemo. Fujio wasn't the only one who looked back. Even Han Susu stopped and was stunned. Big brother Chin. His eyes aren't good. He needs to go home and rest early. Chinmo's voice was calm, but he was still the chosen one. Just by standing there he seemed to be able to move. His aura of nobility lingered and he was incomparably domineering. I won't be singing anymore. Han Susu opened her mouth. It's only 9 o'clock. The smog is heavy and it will irritate my eyes if I'm late. Chinemo tilted his head and looked at Han Susu. At that moment Han Susu didn't know why, but she felt that his gaze was a little cold. But because that face was too handsome and noble, Han Susu couldn't see anything. On the other hand, Jiang's heart sank when he saw Chinemo extinguish his cigarette and walk over. Han Susu didn't want the youngster to leave. However, Chinemo had already opened his mouth. Get dressed. This sentence was directed at Fujio. Fujio smiled and didn't say anything. She casually pulled over her jacket and zipped it up. Chinemo took the pure black mask from the side and asked Fujio to put it on. Then he nodded at Jianghu and Han Feng who were standing on the sofa, indicating that they should leave first. Han Feng still wanted to say something. Chinemo had already taken the youngster out of the private room. What's going on? Han Feng was really confused. Why are you in such a hurry to go home? Jianghu didn't speak. He looked at the microphone that Chinemo had placed on the coffee table. His eyes changed and no one knew what he was thinking. Han Susu was quite considerate of Fujio. Didn't you hear what Brother Chin said? Fujio's eyes are not good, so he needs to go back and rest early. Brother, you heard his singing just now, right? Isn't it very nice? Yes, look at how obsessed you are. What? Now you don't chase after your brother Chin and brother Jiang, but this little brat? Han Feng was still joking. I don't know who said that she doesn't like people of the same age. In her eyes, those high school students are all like children. They're not mature at all. Could it be that this one is very mature? Brother. Han Susu pinched Han Feng and said while pacing, who are you calling a little brat? You haven't seen him fight, he's so handsome. Also, he is different from the people in school, he is very mature. Otherwise, Brother Chin wouldn't recognize him as his little brother. Do you think someone who Brother Chin likes is bad? He is at the level of a male god. I thought only those Dahan Appas on TV were your male gods. They are not as handsome as him. You will know when you see him fight. Han Susu's heart skipped a beat when she thought of the scene at the school gate today. Han Feng laughed. That's strange. If he is so good at fighting, why does Chinemo protect his little brother like a doll? When Jianghu heard this, his fingers paused. He was still thinking about something else. But Han Feng turned around and said to him, Zwa, you have always been smarter than us, what do you think? Jianghu first looked at Han Susu's blushing face and then at Han Feng's face. He knew very well that he couldn't say his guess. Especially not to let Han Susu know. Fujio is also a member of the Supreme Alliance. There are only 2 days left before the National League, and the condition of their eyes is very important to them. When Jianghu said this, he didn't believe it himself. But it didn't matter whether he believed it or not. It was fine as long as the Han siblings believed it. But before he left, Jianghu still said, Han Feng, tell Susu to give up. It is obvious that Fujio doesn't like her, and this is not a good match. He doesn't like someone like my sister? Han Feng found it funny. Then what kind of person does he like? Jianghu really wanted to say that the key was not what kind of person the young man liked, but whether Qin Mo would make him like someone. But in the end he held back and put out the cigarette. Anyway, listen to me. Don't let Susu find Fujio, and don't even think about asking Qin Mo to ask him out. Han Feng saw that he was serious, so he took it to heart. But it was difficult to stop his sister from finding Fujio. Everyone present today should be able to tell that his sister has already fallen in love with him. It seemed that a man who was too handsome could also be a source of trouble. The darker the night, the heavier the haze. The visibility outside was extremely low. So Qin Mo didn't drive very fast. When the domineering Land Rover drove past, it always attracted people's attention. Chapter 406. He thought that he finally understood what Mr. Li meant when he said that his brother would one day be snatched away by some unknown woman. It was very uncomfortable. Especially when he saw that the youngster was going to sing with Susu, that feeling became even more obvious. Although Qin Mo told himself that he couldn't do this, the youngster wasn't his only possession. He wasn't like those toys he used to fancy. He was a real person. Even so, Qin Mo didn't want to see a similar scene in front of him again. To him, the youngster was just a high school student. The rebellious period of youth was the most vulnerable to external temptations. He was the older brother, so he naturally couldn't let him go astray. Puppy love? That was even more impossible. But what if the youngster really met someone he liked? Would he still stop him? Qin Mo didn't know why, but when he thought of that scene, his chest felt like it was being pressed by a huge rock. It wasn't very painful and it wouldn't hurt that much. It was just that the pressure made him want to destroy something. Qin Mo thought that he might make a move even though he knew that it was wrong. But at the same time, he was very clear that the youngster wouldn't do anything to him for a woman. But once he made a move, some things couldn't go back. Qin Mo looked sideways at the youngster with his head tilted. It was probably because the temperature in the car was too comfortable that Fujio felt a little sleepy as soon as she got in. Plus, the Almighty had a calming aura. So Fujio was basically asleep now, but her head was still nodding. Her white pointed chin was exposed, and the black jacket had a circle of fluff around it. Even when he was asleep, he was still extremely handsome. No wonder so many girls liked this guy. Qin Mo parked the car outside the Fu family's villa, but he didn't drive in immediately. Instead, he turned sideways and unbuckled the youngster's seatbelt. He looked down at Fujio, but he didn't retract his arm immediately. Fujio sensed that someone was approaching. But she subconsciously knew that she was in the Almighty's car and nothing would happen. So she didn't wake up. Instead, she leaned forward as if she were on a plane. Her head fell forward and she leaned into Qin Mo's side arms. Qin Mo could have easily pushed the youngster away, but he maintained that position and didn't retract his body. Instead, he moved his left hand and held the youngster's face, straightening him up. Fujio moved a little and even slowly found a more comfortable position in his arms. She rested the side of her face on his palm, looking very obedient. Like a cat with its claws removed, it was still handsome, but it was also very silly. His silver hair was still curled up. The soft and delicate side profile made contact with his palms, giving him the illusion that his palms were being burned by light. The youngster's soft and delicate face, and the touch made him feel as if his palm was burning. Because of this action, the previous stuffy feeling seemed to disappear in an instant. Qin Mo lowered his eyes, the reflection of the silver vortex in his deep eyes. Qin Mo had thought. Didn't Qin? Even if didn't belong to him. Since he was her younger brother, why should she let those girls snatch him away? Qin Mo raised his hand and ran his fingers through the youngster's silver hair. His expression was cold and noble, like a demon in the dark. Qin Mo raised his hand and ran his fingers through the youngster's silver hair. His expression was cold and noble, like a demon in the dark. He ran to the front of the car. Just as he was about to say something, he saw his young master. His young master was throwing himself at young Master Qin? Just as he was about to say something, he saw his young master actually throwing himself into young Master Qin's arms? At this moment, Qin Xiaodong was invigorated. The smog didn't shock him at all. Nothing could shock him as much as this. No matter how big the blow was, it wouldn't be as shocking as this. Young master, how hard is he going to take things? He is challenging Almighty Qin's endurance time and time again. Qin Xiaodong opened his mouth wide at the stupid scene in the car. Qin Mo saw everything. His deep eyes looked up and met Qin Xiaodong's. His gaze was filled with an oppressive warning. Qin Xiaodong was about to make a sound, but it was stuck in his throat. When he saw Almighty Qin put his slender fingers in between his lips, signaling him to be quiet, Qin Xiaodong could only stand outside the car, not knowing whether to stay or leave. Only then did he realize that his young master was just asleep. Qin Xiaodong heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like he was overthinking. Of course, the premise was that his young master didn't pretend to be asleep. But Almighty Qin was a bit too gentle, wasn't he? At that moment, Qin Xiaodong remembered the bed photos on Weibo. His eyes widened again. Don't tell me that these two people are already dating? Did Almighty Qin really get turned gay by his young master? Qin Xiaodong was still shocked. On the other side, Qin Imo had already made his move. He retracted his body and pushed open the car door. Then he went around to Fujio's side and opened the door on the right. Qin Xiaodong just watched because he didn't know what to say anymore. Qin Imo bent down with his slender legs and leaned into the car. He put one hand on the side of Fujio's body, and the other hand under Fujio's knees. Almighty Qin wanted to carry his young master out. After realizing this, Qin Xiaodong wanted to say something again. But he couldn't resist Almighty Qin's aura. Just as Qin Mo's breath brushed past Fujio's cheeks and his fingers were about to press above her waist, Fujio suddenly opened her eyes and reached out to hold the man's wrist. Qin Mo stopped and raised his eyebrows at the young man. Fujio yawned lazily. I fell asleep. Slept all the way. Seeing that the young man was awake, Qin Mo naturally retracted his hand and straightened his back. Get out of the car. Put on your coat and mask. Fujio nodded and lowered her head, pretending to fix her mask. In fact, she was relieved. If she hadn't woken up just now, the Almighty would have carried her all the way home. She didn't know what would have happened. That place was getting more and more disobedient lately. The Almighty never thought that she was a girl because it was safer to wear thick clothes. Unlike Summer, it was easy to see through her disguise. But no matter how safe the clothes were, others might not be able to detect it. But if it was the Almighty, Fujio lowered her head and looked at the area above her waist. He would definitely be suspicious if he pressed on it. This cross-dressing thing couldn't be delayed for long. In the past, Fujio hadn't matured yet. Now that she had matured and after the National League, spring would come after the end of the year. By then she would be wearing thin clothes. Chapter 407. Fujio sat up straight before getting out of the car. Qin Mo had already noticed that the young man was extremely afraid of the cold, so when Fujio came out, he naturally reached out his hand and zipped up the young man's jacket. Fujio was wearing a mask. She lowered her eyes to look at the fingers that were tidying up her collar, and a faint smile could be seen at the corner of her eyes. In short, from Qin Xiaodong's point of view, his young master had never been so obedient. And Almighty Qin's eyes were lowered, and his black hair fell down. His side profile was so handsome that it was easy to have dirty thoughts. As if his young master was his possession. Qin Xiaodong shook his head, trying not to let his imagination run wild. Fujio didn't think much of it. The Almighty had always been considerate, so she always had the urge to raise an Almighty at home. Unfortunately, Fujio studied Qin Mo's face again and didn't know what to do. Is it nice to stare at me all the time? The Almighty's tone was very indifferent. His eyes were clearly looking at her collar, but he could even sense that she was up to no good. Fujio smiled. Yes, we are the super handsome team. I thought you would say the top student team. Qin Mo took back his left hand and put it in his pocket. He stood tall with his deep eyes and raised eyebrows, which was very demoralizing. Fujio. She couldn't let go of the title of top student. Change the topic. Let's go in for a cup of tea? Fujio rarely invited people. Qin Mo didn't agree. He was a little absent-minded. Nah, go to bed early. Okay, see you tomorrow. Fujio turned her head and glanced at her little butler. Qin Xiaodong quivered immediately and followed her. What made him look back was that Almighty Qin didn't leave immediately. Instead, he leaned against the Land Rover and seemed to be lighting a cigarette. His eyes seemed to be looking in their direction. Fujio sensed it too. She turned around and pointed at her mask at Qin Mo. Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. Fujio pointed at his right pocket. Qin Mo touched it and his back trembled. The young man had left a mask for him when he wasn't paying attention. This guy. Qin Mo looked at the young man with bright eyes and white teeth in the distance, and the corner of his mouth slowly curled up. Then in the fog. His eyes were cold and vicious and a little deep. So, why would he give up such a good brother to someone else? After Fujio's figure disappeared into the night, Qin Mo got into the car. He took the mask out of his pocket and placed it in front of the steering wheel. At that time, the two of them didn't know that there would be such a storm in the unregulated official bar. The rumors against Fujio started in the wee hours of the morning. The Spade fans who didn't know right from wrong started to be led astray. Quite a number of them started to become fans of the road or anti-fans. Official bar was different from official Weibo. If such a thing had happened on the official Weibo account, Manager Feng would have received the news immediately. On the other side of the bar, it was an hour later that Agent Feng received the call. A large number of posts were discussing Spade Z's shortcomings. Some people even started to use Spade Z's name to create groups to trick fans, while the fans who really defended Spade Z were scolded as white lotuses. Some of them took the opportunity to gain popularity, while others felt wrong because of what they had done previously. All of a sudden, all of them rushed out to criticize Spade Z. But that was not the point. Chapter 408. It was 4 o'clock in the morning when Feng Yi realized the seriousness of the situation. The country wasn't as open as overseas. In some aspects, many people still couldn't accept it. For example, if Qin Mo and Fu Jiu were flirting with each other, it was okay, but if one of them really liked men, that group of fans was bound to be ostracized. Plus this time the number of posts was too many. Everyone on the internet knew that there were people in the entertainment industry who specialized in raising anti-fans. These anti-fans would attack as long as they were hired. What made Feng Yi angry was who had done such a thing. There must be someone who could profit from this. The only positive measure he could do was to tell the Big V not to leave. But in the face of profit, some people didn't care. They would touch the edge of the topic if they could. 7 o'clock in the morning. The bad comments couldn't be controlled and exploded on the official Weibo. Some people from small teams started to stir the water. What was so disgusting? How could there be such a person who liked men? Someone even wrote, "I won't disband Spade Z's fan group since there are people joining." In other words, she was going to continue to use Spade Z's popularity to deceive people. But some people didn't have good judgment and couldn't understand the situation. Some people with bad intentions argued that they didn't use Spade Z's popularity. But the evidence was clear. Their group was created in Spade Z's name and many people were tricked into joining. Since morning, Feng Yi's phone hadn't stopped ringing. All of them were asking him if the post was true. Was Spade Z really gay? Feng Yi didn't let the situation get any worse. But he was very clear that the situation wasn't going well. But what calmed him down was Qin Mo's call. What's going on? Qin Mo's voice was still very calm, but there was a layer of coldness hidden in it. After Feng Yi controlled the situation, he said, "Someone exposed the fact that little Spade used to chase a man in school, and some people criticized him for many things after he entered the Supreme Alliance. They want Supreme Alliance to have peace. Then tell them that Supreme Alliance belongs to the Qin group, not anyone else." Qin Mo's side profile was indifferent, but his ruthlessness was bone-chilling. Supreme Alliance will always have a place for Spade Z. We will live and die together. Feng Yi paused. Do we really have to be so tough? Qin Mo didn't say anything. Even through the phone he could feel the coldness. Feng Yi understood what he meant. He cleared his throat with difficulty. I'll make a statement now. It's not just a statement. Qin Mo's eyes seemed to be overflowing with black fog. When his black trench coat was rolled up, he looked like his character in the game, the Grim Reaper. This time drag out everyone involved. At the headquarters of the Jiang group, Jianghu arched a brow. That's the reason you came over for tea so early in the morning? Yes. Qin Mo's gaze was cold. Where is he? Jianghu sighed. You called me at 7 in the morning and I set it up for you. Chapter 409. On the Fu family's side. Qin Xiaodong wouldn't let Fu Jiu go to school no matter what. Smart as she was, Fu Jiu quickly sensed that something was wrong. She put her hand on Qin Xiaodong's shoulder. Tell me what's the matter? No, I'm fine. Qin Xiaodong's eyes were still avoiding eye contact. He really didn't want his young master to hear those remarks. Fu Jiu curled up her lips. Is it about school? What can happen to the school? Qin Xiaodong didn't realize that he had been tricked. Fu Jiu said, that's the team's problem. Qin Xiaodong, give me the tablet. Fu Jiu stretched out her hand looking very handsome. Qin Xiaodong hugged him tightly. You almighty Qin said you can't look at these electronic products. My eyes are fine now. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. Give it to me. Qin Xiaodong shook his head. Fu Jiu smiled. You don't want to give it to me? You want me to molest you? Qin Xiaodong's eyes widened. How could young master do this? Even if he was good-looking, young master couldn't eat the grass by his side. Fu Jiu took advantage of this opportunity to take the tablet from Qin Xiaodong's arms. She previewed very quickly. It was almost 10 lines at a glance. Qin Xiaodong comforted Fu Jiu. Young master, don't take these words too seriously. What do these people know? I'm going to the internet cafe. Fujio didn't wait for Chen Xiaodong to finish and threw the tablet back into his hands. Chen Xiaodong couldn't stop him even if he wanted to. And this time Fujio didn't go to Yin Wuyao's. Instead she went to a smaller and closer restaurant. Not leaving a trace in the same place was her usual style of doing things. Even the Almighty didn't know about this. Boss, turn on a computer. This time Fujio didn't even reveal her face and hair color. She wore a black coat with a hood and just sat in the corner of the sofa. Fujio didn't attack immediately. Instead she opened Dazzle Dance as a cover. In other words, even if someone passed by behind her, they would only see that she was dazzling. He didn't know what else she had done besides Dazzle Dance. Fujio put on her headphones and placed her hands on the porcelain white keyboard. Da-da-da. The crisp typing sound was like a rapid note without the slightest pause. For ordinary people, many things might be difficult to distinguish on the internet. Because behind the layers of nicknames, you don't know who that person is. But to Fujio it was just an IP code. No matter how many times the other party changed their nicknames, they would be able to lock onto their true identity by hacking into their IP address. It was impossible to say that he was not affected. Even Fujio understood why the Almighty was paying attention to her. She, who walked in the dark all year round, could not tolerate the darkness. There was no such thing as absolute white in this world. However, in the dead of night, she couldn't help but want to get it done once and for all. Like killing people. So, she was dangerous. Fujio chuckled and thought of the man's side profile as he fixed her collar with his eyes lowered. You can't make mistakes, right? However, he couldn't let him off easily either. Causing trouble on the internet? Don't you know whose territory this is? Fujio held the lollipop in her mouth. You guys should thank the Almighty. If it wasn't for his beauty, all of you would have gone to hell to accompany the King of Hell. If Hoshino was here at this moment, he would definitely recognize Fujio. On the screen, the white code kept jumping and the eagle penetrated the firewall. Chapter 410. 9 o'clock. There was a lot of negative news on the official Weibo. Spade Z's departure from Supreme Alliance had become a hot topic. Some fans of other members also started to leave comments after being incited. Dada, you have to stay away from Spade Z or else I won't be your fan anymore. Lin Feng, Yun Hu, Feng Shang, Yin Wuyao, and even Shui Yaoyao's official Weibo all had similar comments. Shui Yaoyao's eyes turned red with anger when she saw those comments. She felt sorry for the young man. She had nothing in this group of people. But because she had nothing, she didn't care. There were no words but words. She posted a Weibo with the title, The Spade Z You Don't Understand. After clicking on the link, Shui Yaoyao's voice could be heard, very gentle and real. I was a very fat girl since I was young. I wasn't popular in school and I was even ostracized. I was slandered as a thief. If it wasn't for a young man who appeared and told the public that justice might come late, but it would never be absent, I would still be carrying the crime of a thief for the rest of my life. I'm so glad that he appeared. When someone disliked me for being fat and didn't want to play with me, when everyone laughed at me, this young man used his gentle strength to take me to the esports selection contest, and completed the dream that I could never achieve in my life. I think that is the life I want. If Spade Z leaves Supreme Alliance, I will leave too because my dream was given by him. Count me in. Feng Shang quickly followed, and when he reposted Shui Yaoyao's Weibo, he sent a very low voice. Actually, I'm very afraid to speak to everyone in this way. You guys should have heard it, I stutter. Because of this problem, there are many things that I don't dare to do until I met my idol. He said that stuttering is nothing, it's very cute. And he also likes to call me Baby Feng. If there are people who, because of my relationship with him, they won't be fans anymore, then so be it. Yin Wuyao sat in front of the computer with a cigarette in his mouth. He was the least talkative. I came back because someone told me, so what if I'm old? I can still shock the esports world when I'm old. Since this person is going to be forced out, then I'll come back to be the boss of my internet cafe. The voices of the three of them really brought a lot of shock to the fans. Many people were asking if they were wrong. But how could the Kali team ask them to lower their voices at this time? He immediately sent a message using his alternate account. Supreme Alliance will not be threatened by you. You are just 3 rookies and you have so much to say. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that as soon as they said those words, Yun Hu and Lin Feng sent a voice message at the same time, using the same official Weibo. Yun Feng couple. F***ck your grandpa, they're obviously the Feng Yun couple. Lin Feng was still unconvinced. Chapter 411. We live and die together. Just how good was this team member to make all the team members say such words? Even at the expense of offending the fans. The Kali team was dumbfounded when they saw the situation. In their eyes, There were many things to consider, especially the feelings of the fans. But how dare the other side go this far? They had indeed miscalculated. How could the Supreme Alliance be an ordinary team that would not stick to their morals just because they were afraid of offending the fans? Funny. It wasn't easy for them to be standing here. Because it wasn't easy, they had a bottom line. As Xuanhu said, if a team couldn't even be grateful, then the team was finished. Mountains and rivers. The National League. They must go together, no one missing. Because of this voice message, the wind on the internet began to change. People's hearts were made of flesh. Even if they couldn't see right from wrong, they would still be moved by the Supreme Alliance's behavior. The members of the Kali team threw the mouse and were still indignant. Damn it, that Spade Z was almost killed. Should we post another thread? Just as the other person was about to speak, a voice suddenly rang out. No one knew what happened to the internet celebrities in the industry. But at the same time they posted on Weibo. The title of the Weibo was the same: "Come and see what the Kali team's alternate accounts have done." Almost instantly, this Weibo post was reposted like crazy. How could they not repost it? The same IP was divided into many accounts. First, they pretended to be Spade fans and posted on the official forum. After that, they changed to another account and complained that their posts were deleted. Even the fake Spade fan group was created by them. Why did everyone know so clearly? Because the publisher was very considerate. When posting the pictures, he marked everyone with the same IP address with a red arrow. The most shocking thing was that there was a voice message on it. The content of the voice message was, "Damn it, that Spade Z was so close to dying. Should we post again?" It was a clear conversation and even the voice could be heard. It wasn't like the Kali team hadn't broadcast before. Even if their fans wanted to speak up for them, they didn't have the face to say anything. He had been caught red-handed. The two members of the Kali team didn't know that their computers had been hacked. They didn't know about this Weibo post until someone commented on them. The moment they heard the voice message, their faces turned pale. "Who is it? Who recorded my voice?" One of them subconsciously shouted. But when she looked back, everyone here was their content staff. How could they possibly harm themselves? Then how did this voice recording get released? At this time, in an internet cafe street on West Street, the black-masked youth's fingers flew across the keyboard, and several computers around her entered a state of attack. Even the owner of the internet cafe didn't know when his machines had been charged and started operating. How strange. As his voice fell, Fujio put on the hood of her coat and stood up from the chair. Chapter 412. F***CK. The owner of the internet cafe didn't know what was going on. He kept hitting the computer mainframe. Fujio had already walked out of the alley. The trend on the internet had completely changed. But the Kali team was shameless to the extreme. They didn't want to admit it even after being exposed. Maybe they were confident that they wouldn't be responsible for what they said on the internet. But was it true? Not necessarily. Don't treat everyone as fools. Some people were indeed confused. But that was only a very small number of people who had bad values. Under the trend, everyone asked the Kali team to come out and apologize. They used my Big Spade's name to build a fan group. They said they were supporting me, but they were actually slandering me. Who gave you the right to be so arrogant? One person with multiple accounts just to make my Big Spade leave the Supreme Alliance. What a good scheme. Such a team doesn't have the qualifications to participate in the national competition. What a sharp contrast. Look at the Supreme Alliance and then look at you. You are all esports players. Can't you just play games? Why do you have to harm others? Upstairs, you don't understand. First, they used Spade to attract fans and then they drove Spade away. In the end, they were the ones who benefited. I saw the screenshot and listened to the recording. How despicable. I only have one word for the Kali team. Get out. The girls who refused to admit it didn't even dare to turn on their computers after being bombarded with comments. What's wrong with this group of people? I also saw that they are not Spade Z's fans. Does this have anything to do with them? Only an idiot would ask such a question. Perhaps the Kali team would never understand it. Anything that touched the bottom line, people would always stand on the side of justice. It didn't need anyone to organize it, and it didn't need to be anyone's fan. It was human nature. Who didn't have a passionate heart? Except for Lioli and the others. Captain, what should we do now? If this goes on, my live broadcast tomorrow will be terrible. Things had come to this point and there were still people thinking about her live broadcast. Lioli's eyes were gloomy. After all, she had always been the queen of otaku. She had never been scolded like this. It was all because of Spade Z. That recording. How did it come out? Thinking of this, Azure threw the mouse heavily. A loud bang was heard. The whole club fell silent. The members didn't dare to speak. Lioli took a deep breath, fiddled with her long hair and said, "Apologize." Apologize? How could he apologize for such a thing? Once they apologized, they wouldn't be able to compete anymore, right? Lioli looked at the faces of the whole team and said slowly, "Now that things have happened, someone has to take responsibility. Since we accidentally said something wrong and were caught red-handed, we should apologize publicly for the sake of the Cali team." At this moment, the entire team finally understood what their captain meant. What Lioli meant was that whoever released the recording on Weibo should apologize. In other words, they had to sacrifice the two of them for the benefit of the entire team? The two girls who hated Fujio so much just now were stunned. They couldn't believe their ears. "Captain, you were the one who said we could." Chapter 413. Then she glanced at the whole team. "I think everyone has the same idea as me. After all, the National League is coming. Or do you want all of us to leave with you? That's impossible." "Yes, impossible." Someone walked over and said, "Go and apologize if you're so careless." "That's right. Don't drag us down. We still have to compete." The two girls really couldn't describe their feelings at this time. They never thought that their team members would use the method they used on Spade Z to deal with them. It was obvious that everyone had done this together. Why did they say that they were dragging everyone down? Just because their voices were recorded? "You. I won't apologize." One of the girls shouted, "If you want to apologize, everyone should apologize together." Lioli stood at the side, her face expressionless. "That's not up to you. Turn on the computer, the account should be automatically logged in." At this moment, the two girls realized that they had to do it. Because, from the moment the accident happened, not only their captain but also their teammates who were good friends had decided to make them the scapegoats to take the whole thing. That's right, how could they have forgotten? Not all teams were like Supreme Alliance, able to live and die together. Lioli had a good plan. After the two team members released the news, she went on Xuanhuan Weibo. Only then did she go on Xuanhuan Weibo. The statement read, "There is a problem with the Cali battle team. As the captain, I also have some responsibility. I didn't realize in time that there would be such people around me. Now, I have removed the problematic members from the Cali battle team. I have also set up evidence." It had to be said that Lioli's move was beautiful. Because soon there would be people comforting her. Even some of Spade Z's fans felt that she didn't have any responsibility for this. This attitude was very good. But was it really like this? Obviously not. But Lioli still missed one point. Yun, who had already said in the message that Almighty Qin was busy with other things. Since he had decided to make a move, of course he wouldn't let it go. It was almost 10 o'clock. In a Starbucks coffee shop in a shopping mall. A person was still looking down at his phone and computer. He seemed to specialize in this industry. The Weibo page was still open on the screen. However, his mind wasn't on that at the moment. The direction of the internet had already begun to change. No matter how hard he tried to pull it back, it would be difficult. It was all that Shui Yaoyao's fault. When she wrote that paragraph, many people would resonate with her. That would be wasting the best opportunity to attack. However, what puzzled him the most was the message that he had posted on his Weibo. He had been paid to spread Spade Z's information. Why would they post something about the Cali squad? During those 5 minutes, he couldn't log into his account no matter how hard he tried. It was the same for his friends. All of them showed abnormalities. What was going on? Even if he wanted to help the Cali team, he could not. That was his boss. However, his boss was pretty good, especially Captain Lu Li, who knew how to speak. Pushing two people out to appease the anger of the masses was the right thing to do. Looking at the storm on the official Weibo account that had basically subsided. The man picked up the phone and glanced at it. Strange, why isn't the big client here yet? As soon as he finished speaking, there was a swoosh. The chair in front of him was pulled out. Chapter 414. The moment the man looked up, he wanted to run. But how could Chinamo let him run? Almost as soon as he stood up, someone pressed his back. "Sit down." It was the Qin family's bodyguards. These people were all from the army. Even though they were wearing black coats, young master's identity was too special. Not only because he was the only son of the Qin family, but also because young master couldn't be hurt. This was a top-secret order from the inside. And the man didn't know about this. But even so, deep in his heart he was still afraid of the man in front of him. Chinamo looked much more elegant. He sat there with his long legs crossed. He took off his black gloves and said with a light smile, "Who gave you the courage to go against Supreme Alliance and Spade Z?" "Young Master Qin, this is a misunderstanding. It must be a misunderstanding. How would I dare to go against Supreme Alliance? Of course the man wanted to deny it. Chinamo tilted his head and smiled. Misunderstanding? Then let's talk about the law. Article 246 of our country's criminal law states that anyone who publicly insults others or fabricates facts to slander others, even on the internet, will be sentenced to up to 3 years in prison if the circumstances are serious. Hearing the famous young master Qin recite a law without missing a word, that person felt a chill run down his spine. Chinamo casually added, "Do you want to go to jail?" I really didn't. The man still refused to admit it. Chinamo played with his silver lighter in his hand and glanced at the bodyguard with a light smile. The bodyguard raised his hand and punched the man in the stomach. The man's whole body curled up in pain. Chinamo was still like a rich young master drinking coffee. Using Spade Z's popularity to create a group to attract fans. Internet fraud carries a sentence of up to 15 years in prison. How long do you think you will stay in prison if you are charged with all these crimes? The man subconsciously refuted, I didn't create the group. They asked if I could do something, Just as he said this, the man realized that he had fallen into young Master Qin's trap. Chinamo lowered his eyes and even the corner of his mouth was cold. Kali team. The man was really scared because he had never seen young Master Qin like this. He was so scared that even his voice was trembling. Yes, it's them, but now someone has come out to apologize. Finding 2 scapegoats is an apology? Chinamo was just sitting there, but the pressure was strong. It seems like you don't know me well enough. The moment he finished speaking, the bodyguard immediately understood and punched the man's stomach again. The man was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. He begged, Young Master Qin, I'll tell you everything. I was just paid to do things for them. The real mastermind was Lioli, the captain of the Kali battle team. If he continued to fight like this, he would be beaten to death. Chinamo glanced sideways and listened to the man's words. His eyes darkened, but his voice was calm. In your line of work, there should be records of transactions. That person hadn't expected Chinamo to be able to guess this. His eyes were filled with panic. Chinamo arched a brow, his lips cold. That person was afraid that young Master Qin would make another move, so he hurriedly took out his phone. I'll send a screenshot of the transaction. On the other side, Luli looked at the comforting comments under the official Weibo account, and the corners of her mouth curled up. Chapter 415. That was a chat record between her and an internet hacker. It was clearly written that she wanted to hire him to deal with Spade Z, and there was also the payment amount. Lioli never thought that the person she had worked with for more than half a year would keep this kind of thing and post it on the internet. The moment she saw that screenshot, Lioli felt that it was over. She was really over. Even a few people who had no sense of right and wrong were comforting her. However, they were no match for more righteous people. This had angered the public. Even the National League's organizing committee made a statement. In response to the fact that some teams used bad means to slander others, the organizing committee has decided to disqualify all members of the Kali team. Esports is supposed to be a place where strength speaks, not these shameful thoughts. Disqualify all members. That meant that even if they were no longer in the Kali team and went to other places, they could no longer participate. At this moment, the club was completely silent. Everyone slumped down in their seats, their faces pale. Especially Lioli, she was so angry that her first reaction was to call that person. Hey, what the hell is wrong with you? Don't you have any professional ethics, F? I'm Chinamo, just 4 words, and Lioli's voice was stuck in her throat. Almighty Qin, how could it be him? Lioli's face was drained of all color in an instant. There was no situation more embarrassing than this. Everything she did was for this man. But now it was also this man who dealt with her, and he knew all her dirty side. Lioli almost felt that the man did it on purpose, purposely picking up her call. Listen, this is just the beginning. Chinamo wouldn't talk to this kind of woman. He hung up the phone and threw it back on the wooden table. That person smiled fawningly. Young Master Qin, look, I told you it was all because of her. Chinamo glanced at him. Arrest him and take him to the police station. Young Master Qin. That person's eyes were wide open and he still wanted to struggle. Chinamo had already stood up and walked out. Jianghu was standing outside. When he saw Chinamo walk over, he extinguished his cigarette. Even though he knew it wasn't the right time to ask, he couldn't help but ask, don't you think you're too nice to Fujio? He's my younger brother. Who else would I be good to if not my younger brother? Chinamo turned his head and looked at his good friend with a deep gaze. Jianghu's expression turned serious. You know, I'm not talking about that kind of good. Chinamo paused, looking deeply into Jianghu's eyes. That won't happen, we will only be brothers. That's good. Jianghu looked much more relaxed. As long as Qin Mo could confirm that his position in the relationship wasn't wrong, everything would be fine. After all, it wasn't easy to take detours. But it was very strange. Why didn't the main character appear today? It wasn't that Fu Jiu didn't show up, but she showed up at the most suitable place for her to appear, Fu's company. The top floor was where the shareholders' meeting was held. Today the Fu's enterprise was bustling with activity. In Su Mei's words, everyone present was the boss of the Fu's enterprise and had the right to decide the future of the Fu's enterprise. Chapter 416. As we all know, the Fu Corporation is in desperate need of fresh blood to improve its brand. Su Mei was dressed in professional attire, looking very elegant. The esports industry, including the peripherals of the esports industry and online live streaming, all of these are immeasurable profits. It's a pity that our generation is old. Even if we have the advantage in making decisions, we still don't understand what the users really want. That's why I asked old Fu to hold this shareholders meeting. If Ximing takes over the Fu Corporation's new industry, I believe he will guide the Fu Corporation in the right direction. After the shareholders heard this, they all expressed their agreement. Young Master Fu is indeed capable. Many people like him playing games. He has already joined a team from another province and will appear in the National League. This way he will bring a lot of popularity to the Fu Corporation. The sooner the company has a general manager, the older people like us can relax. 3 of the shareholders were related to Su Mei, and one of them was Su Mei's younger brother. Of course they would agree. There were also a few small shareholders who didn't care, they just needed to wait for the dividends. After all, in their eyes, the Fu Corporation would belong to Fu Ximing sooner or later. Even if xuanhuan had shares, it was useless. She couldn't do anything with only 25% of the shares. Fu Zhongyi was different, he had 45% of the shares and Su Mei's younger brother had 15%. It was obvious who the Fu Corporation belonged to. But there were still 2 old antiques who didn't agree with this. They had come together with xuanhuan and Fu Zhongyi. They knew that if xuanhuan hadn't sold all her assets, the Fu Corporation wouldn't have existed. Fu Zhongyi was ungrateful, but they didn't forget. I don't agree, the Fu Corporation is different from before. We have to consider all aspects. Who is on the Fu family tree and who should be the manager of the Fu Corporation? It will sound good if others hear about it. Su Mei had already expected these 2 stubborn old men to say that. She first glanced at xuanhuan and said, "You 2 are right. However, if Sister Honghua's son could make a name for himself, I wouldn't let Ximing come to the company." Now, there was a rumor going around on the internet. How could a boy chase after another man? He did join the Supreme Alliance, but I'm guessing that after today, Jiu will be kicked out. So how can he be the manager of the Fu Corporation with such an immoral image? Before xuanhuan came, she had been prepared to let Su Mei humiliate her. She was also very clear that things were not the same as they were in the past. Since the secretary was the mistress, she would not have the right to speak at the shareholders' meeting. It was a very straightforward reason, because her shares couldn't compare to Fu Zhongyi's. As for Fu Zhongyi, xuanhuan had long given up on such a man. But she knew better than anyone how obedient her Jiu was. She couldn't stand anyone splashing dirty water on her child. This was a mother's nature. Who are you calling immoral? xuanhuan's round body stood up and she smiled coldly. You are a mistress. Do you have the face to talk about others? Su Mei immediately shrank back. xuanhuan clearly didn't do anything to her, but it was as if she had been hit by xuanhuan. Fu Zhongyi couldn't bear to let her go. He stood in front of Su Mei. Chapter 417. She was chasing xuanhuan away. The shareholders all understood what he meant and they all looked over. xuanhuan glared at her. How dare you? Sister Xuanhuan, I call you sister because I respect you. But if you don't want this respect, I can only ask the security guards to escort you out. Su Mei was pitiful. How can the shareholders' meeting be held if you yell at me like this? This is the company, not the countryside. If I don't ask you out, we can't continue. xuanhuan was so angry that her chest hurt. I still have shares in the Fu family. Why can't I sit here? Yes, we all know you have shares. Su Mei pretended to be very reasonable. That's why I invited you to this shareholders' meeting. I've asked you many times to return the shares to Zhongyi. It's fine for us to buy them, but you always disagreed. Now that there are personnel decisions in the company, of course the major shareholders have the final say. The 25% shares are the tens of thousands of yuan that you took out when the company was first established. Sister Xuanhuan, you can't always think that you can do whatever you want just because of a few tens of thousands of yuan. That won't do. All the old people who followed Fu Zhongyi knew that without the tens of thousands of yuan, the Fu family would be dead. But now, even this became Su Mei's topic of ridicule for Xianxia. No one could understand Xianghua's feelings. That kind of infuriating and sad pain made her breath tremble. The two shareholders couldn't stand it and wanted to say something. But Fu Zhongyi coughed coldly. This made them realize that it was no longer possible for Fu Zhongyi to remember their past kindness. Not only Xianxia but even they seemed to have lost the right to speak. Su Mei was still talking. She raised her eyebrows and looked at Xianxia. The company really doesn't need you to create trouble. What are you waiting for, security guards? Ask her out, we have to continue the meeting. Yes. The two security guards rushed forward and grabbed Xianghua's arms. Xianghua's eyes were red. You are just a secretary, what right do you have to do this? And you, look carefully, I am the shareholder. The security guards had been here for a long time and they knew who was in charge of the company. They didn't even listen to Xianghua's words as they dragged her out. Just at this moment, swoosh, something rang out behind him. Subconsciously they turned their heads back and their calves were hit hard by the skateboard. It was so painful that the security guards almost immediately let go with a scream. He pulled the skateboard back. He returned to Fu Jio's feet. She stood in front of the door dressed in black. Her hair was like silver and her eyes were filled with hostility. However, her voice was very calm. Who allowed you to touch my mother? 9? Xianxia was stunned. Everyone in the meeting room stood up because of this scene. Even Fu Ximing, who had been hiding in the small partition, couldn't help but rush out and look at Fu Jio with disgust. Fu Zhongyi was even angrier. He didn't leave any face for Fu Jio and blasted, You wastrel, how dare you show up? Look at all the shameful things you've done. Chasing a man all over the school? All of you scram. Take your mother with you. Chapter 418. Su Mei knew how to behave. She quickly grabbed Fu Zhongyi's arm and tried to calm him down. She said to Fu Jio, Your dad's health has always been poor and you're still so mad at him. Everyone here is your elder. It's fine if you're rude, but you even brought a skateboard here to hurt people. This is not a place you should be. And he advises you to leave. Otherwise it won't be good for you and your mom. Hearing that, Fu Jio tilted her head and smiled. She stood in front of Xianxia and put one hand in her pocket. She looked down at Su Mei. Since you're a secretary, you should just stand there and do your job. This is a conversation between the Fu family. It has nothing to do with you. You. Su Mei narrowed her eyes. Fu Jio, how come you've become like your mother? You don't care about the occasion. I'll say it again, this is a shareholders' meeting. You. Fu Jio interrupted her before she could finish. She was playing with a USB in her hand and her voice was very calm. It is precisely because this is a shareholders' meeting that I am warning you to do your job as a secretary. Otherwise get out of here. You unfilial son. Fu Zhongyi heard Fu Jio's words and became even more ruthless. Call security. Call all the security guards downstairs. Do you think this is a place where you can cause trouble? Su Mei's face turned cold and her eyes were filled with coldness. No one had ever told her to get out of here. This peasant bun, if she didn't teach him a lesson for a few days, he would forget who he was. He deserved to be kicked out. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. How could the smart Fu Jio not see through Su Mei's thoughts? But she acted as if she didn't see or hear Fu Zhongyi's words. She walked over to the long table in the conference room. Then she reached out and knocked on the back of one of the chairs. That person was none other than Su Mei's younger brother, Su Xing. What do you want? Fu Jio, what the hell do you want? Fu Ximing's arrogant little face was full of venom after seeing his actions. In contrast, Fu Jio's expression was much more indifferent. I want to ask your uncle why he has the right to sit here. Fu Jio. Su Mei said again, Su Xing is one of the shareholders of Fu's enterprise. You should call him Boss Su when you see him. You shouldn't talk to him like this. Yeah, how can you talk to President Su like that? That is to say, this Fu Jio really followed Xianxia in death. No matter what, he was born in the countryside. Even if he is rich now, he can't change his bad habits. Luckily, Ximing is in the Fu's enterprise. The two shareholders looked at Fu Jio with disapproval. They didn't have many shares in their hands, but they always defended the Su family. Su Xing also sneered, That's enough, Mr. He. Hurry up and leave with your brainless son. We don't want to always be a joke. Every time the shareholders' meeting was held, Xianxia would receive all kinds of ridicule. She would always clench her fists and tell herself that she had to endure for Jio's sake. But now Jio was standing in front of her, that group of people. Xianxia couldn't stay any longer, not because she couldn't stand it, but because she was afraid that Jill would be wronged. But just as she was about to reach out her hand. Chapter 419. The youth's voice was neither loud nor soft, and it had a unique magnetism to it. It was very nice, and it didn't sound like the country bumpkin Fujio's voice at all. But it was just one sentence. This caused Su Xing's entire body to tremble, and even his expression to change. He, who was originally stained with the smell of alcohol, now looked a little shaky. Where was his previous steady appearance? Fujio laughed, but her eyes were cold. It seems that CEO Su has remembered. You? Impossible, it can't be you. Su Xing's lips were pale. Sumei immediately felt that something was wrong. What do you mean it can't be him? Xing, what's going on? No? Nothing happened. Su Xing's gaze was evasive. Fujio slowly pulled out the leather chair and sat in his previous seat. She looked at Sumei and said 6 words handsomely, "That's it." That was a seat that only shareholders were qualified to sit in. It couldn't be what she thought. How could this be? Xing, say something. Sumei couldn't hold it in any longer. Su Xing stuttered and didn't dare to look at her sister. Finally, she pointed at Fujio angrily. You did it on purpose. You set me up, didn't you? Otherwise, how could I have lost so much that day? In the end, when he lost, he impulsively mortgaged his shares, just to get his money back. He wanted to mortgage it first and then redeem it, but he didn't expect that the other party wouldn't return the shares to him. Su Xing thought that the other party was dissatisfied with the price, so he planned to negotiate again today. How did this kid become the shareholder? Fujio crossed her long legs, looking vaguely like a Siu. Su, that's too much. Did I hold a gun and force you to gamble? You are the one who did not take the shares of Fu's enterprise seriously and mortgage them as you please. After all, your shares are different from my mother's. When President Fu established the Fu Corporation, 90% of the money was provided by my mother. Later, when the Fu Corporation was robbed, my mother took out her remaining money to finance the company and became one of the shareholders. At that time, the Fu Corporation was not worth much, and even if it was rotting on the street, no one would know. My mother was obviously trying to save people. At that time, there were 2 uncles who fought together with her. These people's shares were obtained with blood and hardship, so they cherished it even more. Even if one day they couldn't continue living because of a mistress, they wouldn't think of selling their shares. President Su's shares are different. Just because he has a 3rd sister who is good at pillow talk, he obtained 15% of the Fu Corporation's shares. Of course he can mortgage something that he obtained so easily. You. Su Xing was so angry that his face turned red. Fu Zhongyi and Hisumei's faces darkened. Fujio's words tore the faces of the 3 of them apart, both inside and outside. The 2 elders of the Fu Corporation never thought that Fujio would mention this. Sometimes, in the business world, he had to abandon many principles. But in the end, they were different from Fu Zhongyi. Only after suffering would they understand that it was not easy. Only by living up to the people of the past could they live with a clear conscience. Now that the young man mentioned it, those days seemed to come back to them. Back then they fought side by side. Xuanhuan was uncultured, but she had great foresight and strategy. Some people even admired her decisiveness and honesty. But later Sumei got involved. That woman was good at acting, pretending to be pitiful, and ruined Xuanhua's reputation. Chapter 420. But who said that a village girl was destined to be incapable? Capability could never be determined by education or family background. At that time they were so focused on their work that they didn't notice it. By the time they realized it, it was already too late. Fu Zhongyi was determined to protect Sumei. As small shareholders they couldn't say anything. They thought the result this time would be the same as the previous years. But what they didn't expect was that there would be such a twist. In fact, even Xuanhuan herself was stunned. Jiu, you asked me for money 2 days ago to buy shares? Yes. Fujio chuckled. I bought it for you as a birthday present. What do you think, Mom? Are you satisfied with this birthday present? Of course, Fujio wouldn't tell Xuanhuan that targeting Su Xing was a plan she had ever since she got her computer out of the hospital. But she had to wait for the right time. And the day she came back from Tokyo was the perfect time. Gamblers couldn't quit gambling for the rest of their lives. She and the Almighty used all the money they earned from clearing games to set up this trap. The Su family members who bullied Xuanhuan. How could she let them be free and unfettered? It was just that every mature hacker would leave no trace when they killed someone. Fujio was the same. Her plan was meticulous. Every word she typed was a trap. That was her. Even Interpol couldn't do anything about it. Hacker Z. Xuanhuan looked at the youngster in front of her, and her eyes turned red. Birthday present? So this was how it was given. She was Jiu really? Mom likes it very much. Xuanhuan sniffled and her cheeks were puffed up. Fu Jiu shook her finger. It can't be just this. As she spoke, she stretched out her hand and turned Xuanhuan's body to face Su Mei, who was standing opposite them. She raised her eyebrows handsomely and said, Mom, come on, let's play something more fun. Didn't the mistress just kick you out? Now use your status as a 40% shareholder to make her scram. Su Mei's face turned pale instantly. She clenched her fists. Fu Jiu, your mom doesn't have this right. She does. Fu Jiu's voice was calm. 40% shares is enough to kick a secretary like you out. Or do you want security to kick you out? Su Mei bit her lips tightly as if this was the only way she could control her emotions, which were on the verge of losing control. She couldn't just go out like this. There were more than 100 employees in the Fu Corporation. If she left like this, how could she continue to stay in the Fu Corporation? Su Mei had no choice but to look at Fu Zhongyi with tears in her eyes. Fu Zhongyi's heart ached. He turned to Fu Jiu and said, Who dares to touch the security guards? So what if I have 40% of the shares? Su Mei is my secretary and I am the chairman. It's not just 40%. At this moment, the two old men who had been wanting to talk stood up and walked behind Fu Jiu. And 5% of our total. In that instant, even Fu Zhongyi's expression changed. You guys, loyalty. One mustn't forget one's roots. Those were the exact words of one of them. But Fu Zhongyi didn't listen. He felt like he had been betrayed and he looked at Fu Jiu in exasperation. You've really grown up. If I knew that I would raise an ingrate like you, I might as well feed my money to the dogs. Zhongyi, don't be angry. Su Mei was still pretending. Chapter 421. Boss Fu, you should keep your words to yourself. If my mom had known that she would raise an ingrate like you, forgetting about home after having a mistress, she wouldn't have taken out all her savings to let you start this company. President Fu, you're getting on in your years and you've forgotten all about your past kindness. But it doesn't matter. You'll soon find out that not only can I kick your mistress out of the company, but I can also help my mother take back the company. Otherwise, how can I be worthy of you calling me an unfilial son? Fu Jiu was still as calm as ever, as calm as the clouds. Fu Jiu was still as calm as ever. You. Fu Zhongyi covered his chest with his hands, feeling all the blood rushing to his face. Fu Jiu wasn't worried about this scumbag. She put her fingers on Xuanhua's shoulder again and smiled devilishly. Come on, Mom, let's continue playing the game. I don't need you. I'll leave by myself. Su Mei knew that she had to leave even if she didn't want to. Her fingers were almost numb from her pinching, but there was nothing she could do. It was better to leave by herself than to be forced out by the security guards. But she didn't expect that she would be the one to be kicked out instead of Xuanhuan. This was a humiliation that Su Mei had never experienced before. However, the young man didn't seem to want to stop. Secretary Su, how can you leave by yourself? Take your son and brother with you. We're having a shareholders' meeting, not a family banquet. Fu Ximing was about to explode when he heard this. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Fu Jiu was still smiling, but she gave off an icy aura. As a shareholder, I'm warning you to leave immediately. Fu Ximing still wanted to say more. Fu Jiu didn't waste time. She pressed the phone on the conference table. Security, come in. Seeing this, Su Mei had to pull Fu Ximing over. Mom, look at his arrogant face. I'm not leaving. Why should we leave? Shut up. Su Mei growled. She looked at her baby son, took a deep breath and said in a low voice, If you don't leave, do you want the security guards to kick you out? You're the second young master of the Fu family. Even if you're kicked out, you have to walk out by yourself, understand? Fu Ximing clenched his fingers. I can't take this lying down. Not to mention Fu Ximing, how could Su Mei just swallow it? But couldn't she swallow it? This was a shareholders' meeting. Fu Jiu was a shareholder. Su Mei used to rely on this advantage, but she didn't expect that she would suffer a loss because of this. Because the commotion was too loud, and the door of the conference room was open, when the Su family's mother and son walked out, many employees looked in their direction, intentionally or unintentionally. That kind of gaze made Su Mei feel a burning pain on her face. She wished she could find a hole to hide in. This time, Su Shi and her son's arrogance was completely gone. Not only that, since the Fu family was involved in esports, there would definitely be some Spade fans. After seeing the young man, they were already very excited. Hearing the youngster's words just now, a few of them seemed to have been injected with adrenaline, leaving dozens of comments online. You guys should really get to know this big Spade. He's not only righteous but also filial. He's a prince who protects his mother. At this moment in the conference room. Chapter 422. How could Fu Zhongyi attend the next meeting? It was already good enough that he didn't need to take the pill. He was so angry that he was trembling. But Fu Zhongyi was a man who had gone through thick and thin. Soon, his eyes darkened and he looked at Fu Jiao. He didn't look like he was looking at his own child, but more like he was looking at his enemy, wishing he could cut off her flesh and remove her bones. Needless to say, the contents of the meeting were obvious. Even though Fu Zhongyi had the most shares, there were still a few small shareholders on his side. But the appointment of personnel in the company was no longer up to him. In the past, Fu Zhongyi had allowed Su Mei to kick Xianxia out of the company, leaving her with only the shares and not allowing her to show her face in the company. This was to completely remove Xianxia. But now Fu Jiao was returning the favor. The illegitimate son wanted to be the general manager? As a shareholder, not only would she not agree, but she would also ban the illegitimate son's mother from the company. From that day onwards, the decision-making power of the Fu Corporation was no longer concentrated in Fu Zhongyi's hands. Everyone in the Fu Corporation knew that the huge change in the ownership of the Fu Corporation 10 years ago would probably happen again in another 10 years. The nouveau riche that they used to look down on actually made such a move. The two shareholders who had always supported the Su family didn't expect this. So when the meeting ended, they looked at Fu Jiao with unfriendly eyes. But Fu Jiao just stood there, dressed in black with silver hair. For some reason she exuded a noble aura. This was simply the welfare of female employees. Did you see that? That's our young master from the Supreme Alliance. I heard he's really good. He's not just good, he's the FC King in Zone C. He's skilled and has a good character. The person who said this was definitely a fan of Spade Eye. Of course, there were still many people who didn't play games. But even so, looking at the youngster's demeanor and the way he held the skateboard, he was so handsome that they became his fangirl in a matter of minutes. Someone said, "This person has changed a lot. He wasn't like this before." You guys were too far away and didn't hear it. Who knows who will be in charge of the Fu Corporation in the future? The employees couldn't be blamed for talking. After all, who would have thought that the youngster's side would play such a good card for such a big change? Just like that, Xianxia was still a little confused when she got into the car. But she also realized that her Jiao had changed a lot. It was a good thing that the child had become more mature, but, "Jiao, tell me honestly, how many things are you hiding from me?" Xianxia turned her head, her round face very serious. Fu Jiao's fingers paused and she chuckled. "Mom, why would I hide anything from you?" "Then why did you?" Xianxia hadn't finished. Fu Jiao turned around and placed the skateboard in the back of the car. "Brother Imo taught me. Almighty, I can only borrow it from you. Qin Imo." Xianxia's eyes widened. "Him?" "Jiao," she said. "Hua." He Jiao," she said. "Fu to say. Hua, she. And Hua. She is to say to us. And but. She had thought. Xianxia thought it made sense, but she immediately retorted, "My Jiao isn't stupid." Yes, she isn't," Fu Jiao replied. She took out her phone and sent a message. The message was about transferring money to the casino where the boss of the Su family went. Chapter 423. Fu Jiao replied, "Ha." It was obvious that she hadn't come back to her senses. Xianxia repeated, "I say, Qin Imo is really nice to you." Fu Jiao smiled and took back her phone. She said naturally, "He's my brother, so it's natural for him to be nice to me." Yeah. Xianxia was an honest person and she did whatever her Jiao said. "Then let's invite Qin Imo to our house for dinner. We should thank him properly or we wouldn't have such a good time, ha." Xianxia laughed heartily, just like herself. Fu Jiao said, "No need, I just treated him to a skewer 2 days ago. What if the Almighty's clothes burst when we invited him home?" Fu Jiao didn't want Xianxia to know that the Fu Jiao of the past was gone. She was afraid that the other party would be sad. But Fu Jiao also knew that the closer someone was to her, the more they would notice that she was different. So the Almighty couldn't come. But this time Xianxia didn't listen to her Jiao. "Child, how can your treat be the same as mine? Invite him over for a meal. Qin Imo is good-looking and sensible. I like him." Jiao didn't know what to say. Fu Jiao had to praise her mom for having good taste. She also thought that the Almighty was good-looking and sensible, so she wanted to raise him. But it was too dangerous to raise him by force. "Mom, Brother Mo is so busy with work and he might not have time." Fu Jiao wanted Xianxia to give up on this idea. Xianxia nodded. "That's right, then call him first. I'll prepare when I have time and if not, we can always invite him later." "Okay." Fu Jiao thought that she had finally gotten around it. But Xianxia still didn't drive and looked at her. Call him. Fu Jiu raised her eyebrows. Now. Of course, Xianxia ordered. Fu Jiu couldn't be too obvious, so she dialed the Almighty's number. She thought that she would hang up immediately after 3 rings. Anyway, she had to make a WeChat appointment to call the Almighty, so the chances of the call going through weren't high. But who would have thought that as soon as she had this thought, a deep and pleasant voice came from the other end. Hello. He picked up after 1 ring. Fu Jiu glanced at Xianxia and saw that her eyes were shining. She said helplessly, Brother Imo, it's me. I know it's you. Qin Imo is sitting in the front passenger seat while Jianghu is driving. Jianghu didn't know whose phone call was so charming that it made the person beside him chuckle. Auntie is treating us? Qin Imo glanced at his watch. When is it? Fu Jiu quickly said, It's 6 o'clock today. If you are busy we can do it another day. Judging from the Almighty's tone, he must be busy. Not bad, let's avoid it like this. Qin Imo held onto his phone, his lips curved into a playful smile. You don't seem too willing for me to go. When Fu Jiu heard this, Xianxia's face happened to lean over. Hearing this, she looked at her own child with a very disapproving gaze. Fu Jiu was unmoved. She chuckled and said, Brother Imo, why wouldn't I want you to come? I miss you so much even though I haven't seen you for a day. Why was the Almighty so smart? As though he could hear the youngster's inner thoughts, the smile on Qin Mo's lips deepened. His voice was faint. In that case I'll cancel the dinner tonight. After all, you want me to go. Fu Jiu. Chapter 424. Jianghu saw Qin Imo hang up the phone, turn the steering wheel and raised his eyebrows. Who was it that made you so happy? Fu Jiu. Qin Imo tilted his head and lit a cigarette. You guys have dinner, I'm going to the Fu family. Jianghu agreed. He temporarily believed that Qin Imo didn't have any feelings for young Master Fu. After all, based on his understanding of Qin Imo, the other party had never been a person who could hold back. If Qin Imo really liked Fu Jiu, he wouldn't hold back just because he was a boy. Besides, everyone in their circle knew how straight Qin Imo was. When they were in high school, a playful boy wanted to find a girl for Qin Imo. That night, there was a boy in the private room who was prettier than a girl. But in the end they parted on bad terms. Qin Imo didn't object, but he didn't like it either. So, there shouldn't be anything to worry about. Jianghu felt much more relaxed as he thought about this. He couldn't deny that Qin Imo was really nice to Fu Jiu. But it was probably because he was a member of the Supreme Alliance. Since Qin Imo said that there wouldn't be anything, it meant that he knew what he was doing. For the National League. This brother of his was really attentive. Qin Imo was indeed attentive. The second visit was even more exaggerated than the first. He placed the gift boxes on the floor and said with a faint smile, I came in a hurry the first 2 times so I didn't bring anything for Auntie. Xianxia looked at the gifts on the floor and poked her Jiu's back with her finger. Then she said to Qin Imo, Just come, why did you bring anything? I'm still cooking soup, you guys talk first. Seeing her mother leave happily, Fu Jiu said casually, Brother Imo, every time you come to my house, it seems like you bring a dowry. Dowry? Qin Imo glanced at the youngster who was drinking water and said slowly, Even if it's that kind of stuff, it's still a dowry. Hearing that, Fu Jiu almost choked. Brother Imo, I realize that you are more difficult to flirt with than when I first met you. What? Qin Imo lifted his good-looking eyebrows, and in an instant his black-bellied aura spread out. Fu Jiu smiled faintly. Nothing. Come on, have some fruit first. Xianxia came out of the kitchen in an apron. Qin Imo said, Thank you. He looked noble and handsome. The more Xianxia looked at it, the more satisfied she was. If it wasn't for the fact that the Qin clan's conditions were too good, it was not bad to have such a son-in-law. No. What was she thinking? Qin Imo was too smart. It was naturally good to be friends. Lovers. Qin Imo probably didn't know she was a girl. In the future all of this would be a lie, so it should be impossible for the two of them. The more Xianxia thought about it, the dimmer her eyes became. Her expression was no longer as happy as before. However, these thoughts were still hidden in her heart. When she finished all the dishes on the table and invited the 2 people on the sofa to eat, her face began to redden again. Before Fu Jiu could respond, Xianxia had already said, Qin Imo, Auntie thanks you for today's shareholder meeting. Shareholders meeting? Qin Imo held the wine glass in his hand and repeated the 4 words. Xianxia smiled and said, Yes, I've heard about it from my Jiu. It's a good plan. You're really smart. Chapter 425. The voice sounded as if it was purposely ringing in her ears. She didn't need to think to know that the Almighty was waiting for her to settle the score. She suddenly felt that she should invite the Almighty to her house for dinner or something. What an incomparably huge pit. Xuanhuan was very happy. Which mother didn't want to hear someone compliment her child? The more she looked at him, the more she felt sorry for him. Throughout the meal, Qin ate with dignity and elegance. His every move was like his temperament. He was like a prince. Xuanhuan finally understood what it meant to be born in a prestigious family. A man like this should be liked by many girls. No. Too many men that girls liked were unreliable. There were too many temptations out there. It seemed like they should just be friends. But Xiaodong had said, Qin was the reason why her Jiao was addicted to games. Her Jiao wouldn't. Xuanhua's eyes were filled with worry when she thought of this. She stood up and said, "Sit down, I'll get someone to brew some tea for you to digest." In fact, Xuanhuan didn't need to brew tea. She needed some time alone. Xuanhuan had never realized like today that her Jiao was already a big girl. She couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right decision back then. If she didn't want anything, her Jiao would be like any other girl now, able to fall in love with anyone without any scruples. But now, Xuanhuan didn't want to think about what she would have lost if she hadn't done that. She couldn't go back to her home in the countryside. All her money was invested in the Fu Corporation. Xuanhuan still hadn't forgotten the time when the doctor told her that her child had congenital asthma and had to be hospitalized. How she got through to that number. In a sense, Xuanhuan was even more loyal than the women in the city. She couldn't stand the fact that her man was with another man. The divorce papers had been written long ago. She used to be stubborn, thinking that she didn't want anything and would raise her Jiao by herself. It didn't matter if her life was tough. She still had a pair of hands. She could still be a nanny. The words congenital asthma made her think of Fu Zhongyi. Fu Zhongyi was impatient at first, but when he heard that Jiao was a boy, he immediately transferred the money. At that time, Xuanhuan knew that if she wanted her child to live a good life, she had to do this. Although Xuanhuan was from the countryside, she was a mother. She didn't want Fu Jiao to see her like this, so she didn't go out. This made it easier for the Almighty to interrogate someone. "Now that I'm not here, you can talk about the shareholders' meeting slowly." Qin sat on the sofa and looked at the youngster with deep eyes. His face was handsome. "What scheme did I use?" Fu Jiao knew that she couldn't escape this, so she simply explained the situation. "You're lying." Qin's voice was still calm. But Fu Jiao could still hear the disapproval in his voice. She smiled faintly. Sometimes white lies are necessary. For example, the fact that she was a girl. It would not be good for anyone to say it out loud. As long as Madame Fu did not come back, she had to maintain this disguise. On one hand, it was a good move. On the other hand, it would prevent Fu Zhongyi from making a big deal out of this. But looking at the Almighty,